Top of the morning, everyone. My name is Tshidi and I'm back with another video. And today's video is 10 things an interviewer looks for during an interview. For a lot of people, they always say, I never know whether I've done well in the interview. The truth is, in most cases, we never really know whether we've done very well in the interview. And we always sometimes wonder, what is it that they were trying to achieve in some of the questions that they asked? And what I'm trying to do today is to share with you 10 things that are a lot of the times interviews are looking for. Number one is, do you actually answer the questions? Two is, are you showing us the real you? Number three, do you understand the job that you're interviewing for? Number four is, did you take time to learn about us? Did you do any research about the company? Number five is, do you have the skills for the job? Number six is, would you fit into our company culture or team culture? Number seven is, are you adaptable or flexible? Number eight, do you know who you are and what you really want? Number nine, do you know your own resume? And number 10, which is one of the most important, would I like to work with you in the future? Are you the person that I'd actually like to continue working with going forward? So the first one is, do you actually answer the questions that I ask? What is very, very important in any interview is to make sure that you actually listen to what the question is. The biggest mistake that a lot of people do make is they hear an aspect of the question, and because they've actually memorized that answer, they jump into already trying to answer that, and unfortunately it never works out. So the key thing here is to try by all means to make sure that you listen to exactly what the question is. Once you've listened to that question, you then actually try and answer that, because it's very, very important that there is some listening skills in that aspect, because sometimes you'll find that the interviewer will start asking the question and then there's always going to be a twist at the end of that question. But if you didn't listen to what they were saying, you only hear one part of that question and then you only answer that part, and then it ends up sounding like you are being, or you're trying to too far to actually sell this very positive view that's not necessarily there. So listen to the whole question and respond naturally. Responding naturally basically means that you need to make sure that you bring the authentic you into that particular interview. That's one of the most important things. Number two, are you showing us the real you? Now, the mistake that people make is that it goes with the first question that I asked now, where I said, it's important that we understand that you actually answer the question that we're asking. Now, with this one is where we're saying, are you showing us the real you? Is that so many different questions that will come your way are normally trying to see your personality. They're trying to understand who you are. They're trying to understand if, your answer is 100% familiar with how much you actually match the job. Because you'll find that sometimes you answer the question and some of the things that you were doing were not necessarily completely in line with what the job is actually going to require. However, because you have examples of how some of those things were aligned, you're then able to showcase and show these people what you're capable of and what you bring to the table. The third question is, do you understand the job that you're interviewing for? I've had interviews where some of the people have come into the job interview and halfway through or in the first 5 minutes of the interview, you can see that this individual doesn't even know what job they actually applied for. And that becomes a serious problem, mainly because you'll find that the questions, the way in which they've actually come across, number one is when you get an invite from the company, they'll normally write the title of the job that you've actually applied for. What I always advise people to do is go back to the job spec of that particular job, look at what the title is, look at what the responsibilities are, and then align your answers in line with what they're already requiring for in the job spec. Now, the mistake that people do make is that they tend to, because they apply for a lot of jobs and they don't sometimes know which one they've applied to and which one is actually called them, they come cold turkey into an interview and then they start answering things where you're like, but wait, are we talking about the same thing here? Do you understand what we're actually trying to do? So it's very, very important that you always go back to the job spec, go through it even the day before the interview to understand that you actually understand what the job is. Because sometimes it also gives you questions that you want to ask the panel the following day when you actually meet them. So it's very, very important that you do go back to that job spec. Number 4 is, did you take time to learn about us? Did you do enough research about the company? There are times where some people ask you about the culture of the company. What do you know about our culture? What do you know about our business? What do you know about this? Now, in this instance, once again, they just want to know is, did you actually even bother? Did you take time to go through some of these things to see what the company does? Where are some of the things that they've done well? What have they not done well? What value are you going to bring to that table? And that's why it's very important that you actually do take time to do as much research about the company as possible. Go into their LinkedIn, go into their Facebook page, go everywhere and try and see what their brand looks like, so that when you come to the interview, you at least know the company that you're interviewing for. And sometimes also it tells you if it's the company that you want to work for, because there are times when you go through some of these things, research, and you realize that there's certain things that ethically do not necessarily align with you. And this is fantastic for you to be able to start questioning some of these things at the interview, or to actually even be able to walk away and say, guys, listen, sorry, I know we've actually scheduled this interview, but unfortunately, I don't think I'm interested in going forward with this. You can only be able to do that if you actually do enough research about the company. Number 5 is technical skills, or the skills for the job. Do you actually have the skills to do this job? That is where you'll find that in tech roles, you find that there's always somebody who's coming in to ask very technical skills. A lot of people want to know, for example, they want to see from that side. You've checked the job description. You know exactly what capabilities are required in this job. And if there's anything that you haven't used in the past, you can give example of things that you've already done in the past that are slightly closer to what the job is looking for. So it is then extremely important that you actually take that time off when you're doing the research on the job spec. You also understand what exact skills that are required, because it's the same as I'm a recruiter and I apply for a job that requires a developer skills. Now, if I get into that technical skills or into that particular interview, I'm going to bomb out, because if they start asking very technical questions, yes, I might be able to fluff one or two things here and there, but the moment we start getting to the true details of the technical nature of that job, and I actually don't understand it, unfortunately, I'll end up finding myself looking like I have no clue what I'm looking at. So it's very, very important that you actually take that time to understand even your own technical skills. And that's why I always say, sometimes you look at things like LinkedIn Learning, you go back and you look at Udemy, you look at all those things and you do some of the learning, some of the courses that you actually require to be able to be the best candidate that's potentially out there in the market. Don't forget, guys, I've created another video. The link is up here, which is the top 10 frequently asked questions. These are questions that every interviewer always asks. Every interview, they will always ask you these questions. So check them out and prepare yourself for these kind of questions, because this is what these guys are going to be looking for. So these questions that we're looking at, or when we actually ask you this, we're trying to check if you can actually be able to answer some of these things that we're asking on the other side. Number 6, would you fit into the culture of the company? Would you fit into the culture of the team? A lot of the things that we actually do ask is that sometimes the interviewers will look at during the interviews that they will even want to know if you might not necessarily have the best interview, you might not have the best technical skills, but from a culture point of view, from some of the values that you've spoken about, from some of the things that you've shared in the interview, they then see that you'd be able to actually fit into a specific culture. Now, there was a company that I worked for in the past, and one of these things that they've had is they were free with their language. They were free in being able to tell you when you're actually messing up, and they'll tell you, they'll say, listen, this is a mess up. And sometimes it will even come from the team. It won't even come from your manager. They'll tell you, listen, you're not picking your weight here. You're slacking, you're falling behind. There's too much work that's falling into the team. And one of the nice things about being able to work for that company was that you knew that the team will hold you to account. And that's what we used to check in the interviews. We used to actually check if, for example, we were to hold you into account and you join our team, would you actually be able to receive that and actually take it as a positive outlook? Or are you going to now take that and start sulking and not being able to actually start cooperating with the rest of the team members. So that's why it's very important that the culture part is then checked in those particular interviews. Number 7, are you adaptable? Are you flexible? Can you be able to adapt to the different scenarios? These are where you then have behavioral questions. Now, you've had some times where people start asking you questions like, tell me about a time when this happened and how you dealt with it. Tell me about a time when you did this. Tell me about a time when a work colleague did not speak to you in a nice way. Tell me about. All they're actually trying to check in this question is they just want to see how well you can adapt to the different scenarios. Can you adapt? Can you be flexible? Are you able to turn things around as quickly as possible? Are you able to respond? Are you able to make a plan? That's all they're trying to check. It's not a trick question. They're literally just trying to check if you were thrown in that situation, how would you deal with it? And then we've got number 8. Do you know who you are and what you're actually looking for? Now, you'll find that a lot of people they go to job interviews, and the nice thing about them is that they know that they want opportunities. But if you start asking them questions and you start throwing scenarios to them and you say, if, for example, you were presented with job A versus job B, how would you actually deal with it? Which one would you choose and why? And then you'll find that a lot of people start not being able to actually tell you why they'll pick between each one of those two. And then it's never really that convincing. Your answer is straight, is concise. You've understood what are the key things in that job spec that will make you pick that job. And if you don't want to pick it and there's another job, you need to also be able to articulate why you wouldn't pick that job. So it's all about knowing the person that you are. And one of the other things that we always say is be real. Be natural. One of the biggest mistakes that people tend to make is you start manufacturing answers in the interview. Do I say this or do I not say this? And how do I say? No, just be natural and be normal about some of these things and being able to say, listen, the reason why I would still want to pick this job is because of 1, 2, 3. What I've seen in this job will be able to give me this, will be able to give me that. So you need to be able to showcase the panel that you know exactly what you're looking for. Number 9. It's a simple one. Do you know what's on your resume? Sometimes we then say to you, please take us through your resume. And oh boy. And then people start messing up the dates. And this one says this one, I was doing this. And you're like, well, you said you were doing this for 2 years, but here it says you were there for only 2 months. Sorry, that's the other job. You said you were doing this for 5 years, but it says here you're doing it for 10 years. Like, do you know what's written on your resume? And the moment we start having those doubts of whether you even know what's on the resume, it starts bringing question to say, is this even your resume? Are you even really the person that's put this resume together? So that's why it's important that you look at your resume, you study it, you understand what information you've got there, so that if somebody asks you a question, you can just literally speak through the resume without having to go through it yourself and go through at that particular time. Honesty is the key thing in this particular case. Number 10, would I like to work with you on a daily basis? This question, that's why we keep on saying, be natural, be natural, be natural. What we're normally looking for in this particular question is, are you somebody that's going to bring down the team? Are you going to be negative? Are you going to be that person that's going to complain about how your previous employer was like this, your previous employer did this, your previous employer did that? Like, all you've done is literally in the whole conversation is be negative about the things that you've experienced in the past, and there's never any positive things. I ask you a question about what is the most positive thing about the company that you worked for, and you then still keep on going negative and negative and negative. At the end of the day, that's draining to the people that will work with you, and that's why it's very important that they do understand, are you that person that they'll be able to proudly say, listen, I can work with you and we can fight this together and take the company to the next level. So those are the top 10 things that normally recruiters look for in those job interviews. Top of the morning once again. Thank you so much for watching this video up until the end. Until we see you in the next video on Tuesday. Peace.